extremely excited to have you in the mix in this conversation. I know that we've been discussing this of late in either one-on-one or as a group, and I think we all agree that this is going to become a much more pertinent topic in the days to come as companies start to prepare to return to work. And there may be a number of companies out there that have not necessarily anticipated the impact of stress and anxiety that's accumulated over the last few days relative to the COVID pandemic and home isolation. So thank you all for joining me on this call.
You're welcome.
Oh, thanks, Eric. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to it.
Very happy to be with you guys.
I'd like, before we dive into the topic at hand, which is specific to the impacts of COVID and home isolation, I think we should sort of tackle what the beast is. What is it that we're talking about when we speak about stress, anxiety, specifically in the workforce? Jorg, I think being our resident psychologist, it might be best for you to take that on. So maybe if you could start us off with kind of a high level of what the beast is.
Yes. Well, the stress is both. I think stress is our friend, and stress could be also our big enemy. It's both sides, you know. And I would like to think about stress with a metaphor of playing a guitar, right? You need some tension. You need some stress for those chords to play great music. When there is too much of it, when you tie too much those strings, the chords are popping up, right? And the music doesn't sound so good. So I think what we learn about stress, that is associated with change. Every time there is changes, and even positive changes, like getting a new home or getting a new job, create stress for us. And we need some of it. You know, Hans Selye, who was really the father of stress management, wrote an amazing book called Stress Without the Stress. So I think the game here is how to keep stress at an optimum. It's like a curve, you know, when there's no stress, you know, there's no tension, there's no challenges. When there's too much of us, we start feeling anxiety, we start feeling depressed. We start getting ill. That's the problem with it.
So there's healthy stress and there's unhealthy stress, and it's defining the two.
Exactly. Stress and neurostress, exactly. And that balance is very, very important. What's so interesting about stress is that we respond not only to real changes, but also to imagine changes and to the mindsets in the stories, the narratives that we create around the events and the changes in our life. And the way we interpret
anxiety
events
comes from, yeah.
Exactly. That's why you can see, like now with COVID-19, a whole range of people responding in different ways. You know, some people are so eager to come back to work, and others see it as a great danger. Why the same event? At times it's being perceived in different ways, and that's
so. I know that part of one of the biggest contributors to stress and anxiety is uncertainty. What do you see as the telltales or the things that are driving the increase in stress in our world today?
Well, as we're seeing, life is a lot more complex. It's moving at a faster pace, and the disruptions are bigger. And so we're all experiencing that challenge to adapt. And in a lot of the organizations that we live in, there's no guarantee of employment or guarantee of tomorrow. And so there is this kind of fight or flight instinct that begins to take over. That's that chronic stress that Jorge is talking about, when it goes from that productive focus kind of stress, that work focus performance, into fear or uncertainty. Then that begins to ruminate. And again, without the pace of life and turning it off has been a big challenge. Dr. Ahmed Sood at the Mayo Clinic says that a lot of the times when our mind is not engaged or purposefully engaged, it goes into that negative rumination we cycle through. Then there's the lifestyle habits. 50% of the US population has some form of chronic disease. That comes because of the unhealthy coping behaviors to stress, eating the comfort food, drinking more alcohol than's necessary, binge watching, smoking, and then that disrupts sleep. So we've gotten onto this treadmill of a vicious cycle for the last 20 years or so, where we're becoming less and less resilient and reaching for the unhealthy coping behaviors to manage the stress of the day.
Because I think the one thing that we're starting to understand, and certainly with the help of the world of cognitive psychology, is that things, built up stress and trauma, are things that can lay potentially dormant and be triggered by events later on. And I think that's what the true concern here is that people move back to work, to places that are not exactly what they remember. And there may be events or circumstances that may trigger that stress, that trauma in the future, and employers and business owners won't have seen it coming.
That's such a key point. I was talking with Dr. Pinos, which is an expert in post-traumatic stress after pandemics like those, and he just mentioned that how important it is to train managers to understand that we're asking people to come back at times. Especially I deal with a lot of healthcare situations. Mm-hmm. So we're asking them at times to come back to exactly the area where they felt, some of them, that they got ill, or they associated with definitely the stressors. So how important it is to know that, at times individuals respond to that, trauma, by the way, and that some people have what we call a delayed reaction to that. Mm-hmm. And that you're correct, that if there were other dormant issues or past traumas, these definitely will exacerbate it.
Exactly. And Bob, I know that you have your pulse on a lot of opinions out there connected by way of Work Design Magazine. I know that you talk to a lot of CEOs in the industry. What, between yourself and Rex, what are you hearing from the business leaders, the business owners, relative to this topic?
I think what most leaders are facing right now is, how do you bring your workforce back? How do you bring them back into an environment that they're all going to feel comfortable in? I think one of the challenges right now is we're getting, conflicting information, because I think on one hand, you've got, a group of people saying we need to get back to work. And then on the other hand, you've got a group of people saying there's tremendous risk and, be careful. So, I think trying to balance that. I think what we've seen, in the response to the work environment there's multi-stages to this. I think the first stage is really kind of stepping back, looking at it, trying to assess the situation, looking at it from a behavior, policy, how do I need to have my people, react or behave in a certain type of situation. Then I think there's the physical environment. How do I need to adjust that physical environment, to accommodate those people so that they feel safe? And then the third phase, I think, is going to be a complete, reevaluation of the way that we think about work. And I think the mindfulness and the health and mental health aspect of it is going to become much more important, because I think that's a big conversation now that's taking place. I think people have the level of awareness has been raised for that. And so I think you're going to see all of those things, starting to come into the workplace now.
All of the effort in our industry has been on the physical side of making people feel safe. We've not prepared managers for the mental condition that people will be coming in. We've not prepared them on the additional emotional care they're going to have to give. Most managers aren't trained in or don't have high emotional intelligence, and they don't have the kinds of skills to know that when somebody acts out, it may be through what's called dysregulation. They just pop, as opposed to bad behavior. So now we've got all kinds of things that companies are already starting to hear from. Employees putting high demands on safety. Litigation is a concern. And there's, if I get COVID, all of these, this is a brewing pot that we really have not talked about, addressed, and looked at least to the degree that we have on the physical safety side.
I think if you look at what is really needed right now is a conversation that extends that, to a much more multidisciplinary approach to the way that we think about the workplace. And so, we should be having conversations up front, about, health and well-being, about the mental aspects of it, how to align the workplace with, the policies, the behavior, the values of that organization, so that, that the safety factor is integrated into the environment. And it's not something that's applied to it.
And I also see an opportunity. I believe that this COVID-19 is highlighting two things that Daniel Pink, who is like a guru in motivation, talks, that employees need autonomy, and they want autonomy. And I think people working here, people will understand that maybe there is more than an office, that people do the best thinking, not in their office, but at times in other spaces. So autonomy, and I think connection, so important. So how do we maintain those things? And I think here, managers, designers, as you point out, psychologists, we're going to get together. And I do see a silver lining in how the future will evolve to decrease some of this stress that we have in modern society.
Agreed. Yeah. In our recent discussions, we talked about the shattering of assumptions being behind stress and anxiety. And if you have a workforce that's mobilizing to move back to an office, and their assumptions are that they're moving back to what it was before in some capacity, and what they arrive to is drastically not that, and they haven't been prepared for that, is that potentially one of the triggers that we're cautioning against?
Eric, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think the getting back to normal now has become an alternate reality, and so I don't think people have, fully embraced the fact yet that, when they do come back, things are going to be different. And, how do we embrace that and prepare people for that?
There's been a lot of broken trust through this, or what you might say, confidence in the organizations. And we're going to have to take time to rebuild that social capital with people. That's part of the psychological safety side. We're focused on the physical side, but people are coming back wondering, am I going to have a job in a year? Managers are going to lack clarity because they're in brand new territory, and that's going to create pressures as well. So there's just got to be a time invested on that front end of not just jumping back into work, but checking with everybody. How are you doing? What's your story? How are you now? What do you need? Those kinds of areas are not something we're traditionally prepared to do. But before we can dive back into the work stream, we have to rebuild all of it's Maslow's hierarchy. Just rebuild the foundations of physical safety, psychological safety, clarity about roles and connection before we begin to get into the productivity side.
Right. Bob, working in the world of architecture as we are, how do you think that designers can think about the workplace and the office of the future as being conducive to this?
Eric, I think we've kind of been through a massive change, because I think if you look at the workplace, traditionally what we've tried to do is squeeze as many people in there as we can. And, we've always looked at, things like square footage per person. That doesn't really hold water anymore. And I think Jorge kind of hit it right on the head, where he talked about, where do you go to come up with your best ideas? Where do you do your best work? And so I think what you're going to see now is, the workplace is going to evolve into a much higher level of thinking and, inspiration. And, I think we're going to rethink the way that we collaborate and interact with people, as a result of this.
I think that one of the things that this disruption, the people being forced to work, perform their regular functions under very irregular circumstance, has provided scenarios whereby people have a better understanding of where and how they can do creative work, where and how they can do focused work, because they've had to do it in arenas that they're not used to. So they're going to come back to the workplace much more informed as to what they need as far as the environments and the tools to help them think in different ways and collaborate in different ways. So it's a very exciting opportunity from that respect.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is, I think a lot of people have approached the workplace as a place to house their operation, and there wasn't a lot of thought to, serving the purpose of the organization. And so I think leaders have an opportunity now to step back, look at that workplace, as a leadership tool, how do I get the best performance out of my people? How do I keep my people healthy? How do I raise the bar in terms of the level of creativity and innovation that our organization needs? And I think you're going to see the space evolve into these, much more, collaborative, interactive types of spaces. But, there's going to be more space involved. And I think there's going to be, more safety and comfort, that's involved in that.
And I'm excited, about that, what Bob and Rex are talking. We call it social architecture. It's helping people see beyond the space of how can we build inclusive, exciting, dynamic workplaces where people feel safe, feel calm, feel connected, feel creative. And I think it's an emotional intelligence skills. And I think we need to help them to think as social architects.
Jorge, I'm looking at the space you're sitting in right now, and the nature, the natural light, the bird sounds and everything. I think I would do much better work in that space.
That's where we should all be. Yeah. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all very much for participating in this. I think that was some great insight, and looking forward to sharing it with the broader community. And also seeing how this evolves in the coming future. I think we are all agreed that this has been an opportunity for us all to learn a tremendous amount on so many levels, and it will change so many things. Workplace being one of them, and the way that we conduct ourselves in the workplace.